I really see whether it's a small team or like a massive organization, I see them as like organisms. There's a spirit of every team. And if you think about every team you've been on, there's a different spirit. So I think of culture as like the spirit. And if you don't nurture that spirit as a CEO, it's still there. And you think I'm going to farm it out. But I mean, nothing is more affected by humanity than a CEO, or I guess nothing affects a team with their humanity like a CEO.
Welcome to Leadership Rewired, the podcast where we cut through the noise and talk about what leading really takes. No sugarcoating, no jargon, just real conversations, hard-earned insights, and practical wisdom to help you lead through change. Build the cultures that work and stay human while doing it. Let's get into it.
If your company's culture is broken, often leaders will defer to HR. Today's guest has the data, the background, the stories, and quite frankly, a different take on where culture actually lives. My guest is Brennan. He's the author of a book called Badass IT Support and is the creator and founder of QSTAC. This is a platform that's transforming how we think about experience and how you quantify that experience. Ben is known for his very irreverent style and his ability to get to truth in a very authentic way. And when you think about most IT people, he's not leading from a tech side. He's leading from psychotherapy, culture, leadership capability. Welcome, Ben, to the conversation.
Hello, Allison. Really good to see you.
By the way, I'm loving your background. Tell me a little bit about what's going on. Is that a piece of art? Is it tapestry? What's happening?
It is a tapestry. I would also consider it a piece of art. There is a hummingbird's tail that you can see here. This is an upside down dragon. There's a lot happening here. It makes me happy. My beautiful lady loves dragons and loves birds and loves animals. She's a veterinarian. She doesn't treat dragons necessarily, but they do factor in around the house. So it makes me happy.
Yeah.
I think it's by someone called Android Jones, but don't quote me on it.
Okay. The first thing I thought of when I saw it was I did not wear pink for your tapestry, but I'm glad it worked out. The second thing I thought about was anime. And I don't even watch anime, but that's what came to mind for me. Let's get back to this conversation of culture. I do love talking about it. Me, HR, you, tech, information technology, author, founder. We don't necessarily come together naturally, but I think one of the things that makes sense, other than the fact that we just get along, is this notion of culture and this debate about culture. You know, I think often being in HR, when we've had this sort of responsibility, it didn't always make sense to me. I don't think it belongs to HR. But tell me specifically from your side, why do you agree with that?
I think it's easy to think of culture as HR's job because for a lot of founders, they think, oh, it's people stuff. I see whether it's a small team or a massive organization, I see them as organisms. There's a spirit of every team. If you think about every team you've been on, there's a different spirit. I think of culture as the spirit. If you don't nurture that spirit as a CEO, it's still there, and you think, well, I'm going to farm it out. Nothing affects a team with their humanity like a CEO. If you think about all the teams you're on, even if you're a director or a VP, your personality comes into play and affects that spirit. There's no outsourcing it. You're affecting it whether you like it or not.
Double click on the word spirit for me, because I actually, if I'm being honest, never thought about culture and spirit in the same vein. Double click on that for us.
As I'm older, I start to see that a lot more because I work on myself more. As a father, as a leader with more experience and more self-awareness, I realize it's not a book that I read or a specific leadership philosophy that changes things. It's really like, am I taking care of myself? And when I think about culture, the reason I use the word spirit is because a lot of people use the word culture to mean myriad things and they just a buzzword and it doesn't mean anything really.
Right.
But if you think about spirit, then it kind of does mean something. Like think about this. If the worst happened, everything closed down tomorrow, would your team, when they were talking to their friends, say that was the best team I'd ever worked on? Or would they not? And that tells you about the spirit. You can ask them. I was asking my coworker, Maddie, about this the other day. I was like, what's the best team you ever worked on? And she lit up when I said that, this huge smile, and she started reliving it. You could see there was a vibe to it, a spirit to that team. And I think that word for me means more. A team is kind of like a living organism, in my opinion.
I actually get the living organism, but I think the thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about spirit, I often think about what could corporate America teams learn from sports teams. And if you think about even when we were in high school, I was on the track team, I was a cheerleader, if you want to believe that or not. I tried a little stint of doing basketball, but what was always really important in all of those experiences was where we start and what we were trying to accomplish and how we were connected. And I think we knew in that sort of sports analogy, just for a minute, what our roles were and how important those roles were and how they connected to something bigger. There wasn't all of the sort of politics or all the things that can break down culture. It was, we have a goal and an objective and we need to do something about it. Is that similar when you think about culture and spirit, especially as it relates to teams?
100%. Phil Jackson, I don't know if you've read his book, but that Bulls team had a spirit, like all of the NBA. I grew up in a time where NBA was very popular and big in the culture. And like every team had a different spirit. I think about the Bulls a lot, not just because of Jordan, but today I was thinking about Rodman and how they dealt with that. Phil Jackson would sit down with all these like highly paid kind of testosterone filled people, made them sit down in silence, maybe for the first time in their lives, and just listen to themselves. It was all about the teamwork because you cannot do it with a chaotic team. Like your spirit of your team has to be aligned and has to be rowing in the same direction. We've all worked on teams where they're rowing in different directions, and what happens? You don't make it,
Right. And I think the core of that whole team piece is the leader, right? How clear are you with people about where they sit? How do you show up? How do you motivate? How do you connect the dots for people if they're confused around something? Your book, Badass IT Support, goes way beyond IT. It's really the blueprint for experience and leadership and first-time leadership for a lot of folks. Where did that lens come from, and why were you inspired at the moment to write that book?
I think you mentioned my first career was in psychotherapy, talk about your feelings stuff. And then I went into like emergencies, like consults, where we got to talk to a lot of people, at their best and worst. And I started off wanting to just understand the human experience because like everyone in psychology, we go in to figure ourselves. So I wanted to figure out myself. And that got me through my master's degree, just in this quest of understanding the human experience. And then I was traveling around, I tried to do art for a while, and then I landed in San Francisco and I just needed a job. So I got a job in IT, not typically your badass vibe. But what I realized was my ignorance of how IT was supposed to be. I'd never worked a corporate job. I just came in and I was like, well, I don't know how to do any of this. So let me just, figure it out. And the absence and the ignorance of how IT should have been allowed me to just go up to executives and say, this might sound weird, but what does IT do and what do you want? I asked it from them. They want like the printers to work. They want everything to work. And they want, obviously some innovation at some point, but really just everything to work and their employees to be happy. So I just started doing that. I was like, let's make it cool. Let's have fun. I didn't know any better. I started at startups. And as I got in bigger teams, people were really impressed. And my teams were blowing metrics out of the water. I realized I'd stumbled onto something. You can be cool and deliver something badass. IT doesn't have to be boring. Especially back then, it was just really boring. I wrote the book to share because you would have people that started in IT, worked every day, fixed problems, retired 30 years later, and they had never felt like success. They were just a cog. I was like, what if you bring basic principles from leadership? Set a goal, measure it, achieve it, raise the bar. Basic leadership was missing. And my kooky artist, psychology-driven self was a good fit for that. I was successful. I had teams that loved working there and everyone loved the IT teams. I started speaking a little bit and then I wrote the book to share it because I think everyone really wanted it. I realized from writing the book, everyone did. And IT people were not boring people. They were cool people with boring cultures a lot of times. And these cool people would come to work and feel like they had to act boring. The people that resonated with the book the most weren't IT people. They were business owners, creatives, and people that led creative teams for Apple and people that, in academia. And my significant other loves the book. She runs a 30-person animal hospital. And it was about customer experience. More than anything, it was articulating what a lot of us, intuitively. And I found, because words matter, if I called it exceptional IT support Because it's a meaningless word. I would have called it world
Right.
class. It would have flinged it up. But badass, you know what badass is. If I showed you
Yeah.
4 people, show me the badass. You could show them to me.
There's so much in what you said and so many paths that I could go with the next question, even though I have my beautiful list here. There's a lot of similarities in organizations between HR and IT. And we don't need to break those down. That's another podcast. But there's so many similarities. These are often the groups and organizations that either have presence, they're at the table, making big strategic decisions, driving innovation, or they're tucked under legal or finance because of someone's perception of the power of the work. And if we come back to what you just said, you go into this organization, you were asked, what do you want me to do? They told you, and you came at that work differently. Had you been a traditional IT person, you probably would have done the list. There's something about the way you were thinking about the work. I use this often, and you can poo-poo it if you want. When you come at work with more curiosity, you actually think about how the work can be done differently versus your typical checklist of how to do things. Like, does that resonate?
Curiosity is what I consider one of the core competencies of a leader. I mean, that's we know, from studies, that's what smart people are. They're very curious, and you have to stay curious for many reasons. Like leaders need to stay curious because you get to be a leader a lot of times because you're maybe the smartest person in the room. But as a leader, if you think your idea is right and you're not spending effort getting out of the way of smarter people to create things, then you're doing it wrong. I think curiosity is key. And I think that beginner's mindset for IT and HR, really any profession right now, because the workspace has changed. I started before the iPhone, before all this AI in the workplace, everything's different. So to not be curious about how things are happening and what the new generation is doing, that's unwise, I think.
So you've seen a lot. Tech startups, global organizations, executive teams that say they care about culture, but they don't actually act like it. What's the one moment that made you realize that culture is actually core to how businesses are run?
I think, and this happens a lot. I'm working on a book called The Culture of Wow. I'm focused on these wow teams where you work on it and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. A lot of times you don't realize you were on a wow team until you were on a not wow team after that. And I think for me, it was just like, it just seemed normal. Like, we're kicking ass. This is fun. We're having a blast. It seemed normal. I was just everyone was bringing themselves to work and we were just doing the thing. And then I had to move to a different team. And I went from CEO to not being CEO anymore and new cultures. Then I realized, oh, not everyone does this. We did have something special. And I didn't appreciate it while it was happening. We look back and the memories are amazing. But at the time, we weren't coming to work saying this is amazing. We were coming to work doing amazing work. And I think it wasn't until I worked under a different culture then I was like, oh, this is something that maybe we need to talk about.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because it made me think about a culture I was in very early in my career. I was clear on my responsibility, my role, and how it impacted other people, clear on what my deliverables were, had check-ins with my managers, had check-ins with my project teams, connected the dots, felt accountable to share if I'm late on something and why that was the case, but how I'm going to make it up, and really just felt connected to something bigger than myself. And then when I was in cultures where these things weren't happening and I felt almost like an island unto myself or fighting the political battle, it did not feel great. You were referencing one where you were feeling great about everything. And then when you weren't, what would you say in the elements of the culture where you didn't necessarily feel as motivated, as connected? What were the things that you were noticing?
Yeah, I think this is a word that we don't have to get into. Again, you've already done podcasts about it, but I think the lack of self-awareness in leadership is almost always like a prime suspect, right? And, they did a study, I think HBR published a study rating self-awareness on like a kind of an objective scale. It's about like 80-something% of executives are self-unaware. And it's divided by gender, 95% of men and 80% of women in leadership, self-unaware. And so, that goes around, but it makes a huge difference. It can be a competitive advantage if you overcome it. But I think that's a big one. One thing that might be niche, and I'll just mention it. We don't have to go into it if you don't want to, but an interesting thing I've kind of noticed when I'm thinking about, the differences between wow cultures and not wow cultures is for leadership, not just self-awareness, but there's this ability to do the basics of leadership, which is make decisions, have conversations, and make difficult decisions and have difficult conversations. Anecdotally, the leaders that I love that are in these like wow cultures, they can handle it. And conversely, I've seen a lot of leaders that can't handle it. They won't do decisions, which is kind of arguably what an executive should be doing. And then have hard conversations. They shy away from it. It's human stuff. Like asking someone to prom, having an interaction with your significant other. It's the human stuff that kind of goes awry. I think that, especially since most people are self-unaware, that's a hard thing to bring to executives. There's an art and science of how do you make someone aware of that without being defensive.
How do you even get to what you would deem quote unquote executive without having either experienced the human stuff or having to actually deal with the human stuff? How does that happen? Unless you are a founder, a startup on your own, how do you grow your career and not deal with it?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it has to do with culture. There are cultures where not rocking the boat is just, you'll just float right on up. One VP in general that I reported to, his superpower was just not rocking the boat. Like if something was coming down, I always saw my role as a leader. I led teams of 100 plus in IT. And I always saw my role as blocking the bullshit from people and fighting for them, advocating for them, for their pay, for what they need to do their jobs so they can focus on being the talent. They were the talent. I was like the umbrella. And I'm thinking of one VP in general that he would not go to bat for his team. It was shocking to me. You see it a couple times. Maybe he's working for a promotion or something. No, he was playing the game. It's more of a comment on the culture that they could do that in. I've seen it happen. Maybe all the executives you've met have been amazing and great, but I've seen someone slip through.
I think middle leaders are the layers within organizations that have the biggest opportunity to influence culture. And it's the biggest opportunities for organizations to get leadership right. And if we took on, this is just my hypothesis, and I love your point of view, if more organizations took on responsibility for investing in that layer, not just because the team got big or they're really good at being an engineer, but actually saying anyone that's falling into that layer, we are going to look for capabilities or characteristics that actually drive the culture we want. And we're going to make sure that when we're looking for the next senior director or VP, we're going to look at that middle layer because they already have the goods. Do you agree that that middle layer actually has the biggest opportunity?
I agree that it has a huge opportunity. A lot of times the problem is there's not visibility or a line of communication between that and the top layer, but they're the ones that get things done. If you can harness that, you can create this bullpen of amazing leaders, which is awesome. My favorite thing to do is manage people managers. Like managing ICs is fine, but managing people managers is my favorite thing because that's my strategic brain tapes in. And it really is just focusing on them. And so my job, like that job where I had the 100 plus org, I had 8 directs. So I had a team of 8 and they did all the work. I sat there and whiteboarded stuff. They did it all. And my job was really just helping them learn, which is a lot of times the basics of leadership, like just the base. I think we overcomplicate it, but that realm of middle managers is huge. And I love it because there are a lot of times a little less political. A lot of times they're like down there, and you talk to them, the real stuff that's going on. Ask them what's going on in the company. Go drinking with those guys, and they'll tell you.
Not that we're promoting that drinking is a way to get to culture, but it's definitely there. You said that culture isn't HR's job. It's leadership's, right? Why do so many leaders hand it off? I think we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but let's deep dive this a little bit more.
I think they're just uncomfortable on a human level. It is as simple as that. Makes them uncomfortable, makes them feel a certain way, and they're like, pass. They don't see that. They're comfortable with left brain stuff. That's why I talk about things in terms of spirit. Like as a leader, you bring your whole self to work, whether you like it or not. I don't see a lot of people that are terrible wives or husbands or terrible brothers or sisters or terrible spouses or friends that make great leaders. That stuff matters. And so it might be great to be like, culture is HR's job because I don't want to deal with it. But you're still affecting it. And so I think it's just out of discomfort. What do you think? Do you think that's why they do it?
I'm probably going to get dragged for saying this. I think organizations like McKinsey started talking about culture and how it was the responsibility of leaders. Organizations look for places to place things. HR felt like the best place for culture. And, and then leaders were like, okay, well, just tell me what I need to do. And I think similar to AI, there is an element that is the responsibility for everyone, just like building inclusive cultures, just like building teams. Let's say I'm a VP and I see in my team a very toxic behavior. And I think, it's not that bad. In your opinion, what's the real cost of ignoring toxic behavior within a team?
I think look at your company's core metrics. In my experience, cultures that allow toxic behavior don't hit all their goals. Are you getting 100% of your OKRs? The real cost is performance and output. It has a real impact. And you can ask your middle managers about that. They'll tell you.
But this leader might say to themselves, if I dealt with every toxic thing on my team, that's all I'd be doing all day. And I don't have time for that.
Yeah. My first answer would be do better. Secondly, to your point, it doesn't have to be HR. It doesn't have to be the CEO who's in charge of the culture. Like the best, and you'll laugh because the best company culture I ever worked in, this is long before Elon, was Twitter. And how they did it, there were a few hundred people and they went around and they had a good culture already. Like there was an X factor about it. So they went around, interviewed everyone at the company and compiled all the data of like, what makes this a good culture now? What do we value now? And they got it down to 18 to 12, like to 8 goals. And the reason I know so much about that is I was a culture ambassador. I did the new hire orientation for thousands of Twitter people. Another person was internal comms, the head of internal comms. There was someone who I think, Olivia, who's in marketing. There was an HR person in it, but it was just about the people. It was like, who knows how to do this and who's passionate about it? They chose the right people. The cultures were organic to begin with, and they had the right people driving it, holding people accountable to them. And you could use that as a shared language that really mattered. Conversely, not too long thereafter, I worked at a company that had core values that they literally once a quarter, they were up on a slide. And I remember asking the leadership team, it's like, okay, who can list any of the 5 core values? Nobody knew what the core values were. And it just came across as inauthentic. And so every time that slide got put up, everyone groaned because they're like, okay, this is cute. And so I think the secret really is having that group. So as a CEO or a VP, find the people who get it. Like, who are the people that get it? Who are the people that high EQ, they get it, pull them together and be like, okay, you guys are deputized. What do you need to do this? And let them run it.
Yeah, you're not going to get any laughing from me on Twitter. I loved Twitter. I actually felt, quite frankly, shortchanged. I was so excited about that job. I loved my team. I loved day one. I loved every supportive thing that came afterwards. I was fortunate to get a year before it all went south. I completely agree. I felt immersed in the culture from the time the offer was made to, quite frankly, the day I exited, which was when it was right under Elon. I felt like people were very authentically trying to take care of everyone. A great culture, in my opinion, and a shame about where it is right now. We talk a lot about being authentic, especially as leaders, but we know that not a lot of leaders walk the walk or talk the talk. What, in your opinion, shapes the difference between the leader who shapes culture and what are those attributes and characteristics versus the ones who don't?
We talked about self-awareness, the ability to have those hard conversations, curiosity. And I think the word we didn't use, but I associate it in the same bucket as curiosity, is listening. I think it sounds like a simple word. It sounds like, oh, listen, but how much do you really listen? I remember with bigger teams, I talk a lot. I interrupt a lot. I'm self-aware about that. I know. And when I would start one-on-ones, what's going on? And just listen. And then if people are used to you not listening and maybe you're a defensive leader, start with some icebreaker questions. My favorite one was, what do I do that's annoying that I don't realize I'm doing? And everyone had an answer. I just phrased it in a way where it wouldn't make me defensive. I'm like, I'm not doing it on purpose, but theoretically, if I ever did anything annoying, what was it? And they had that. When I listened, I learned so much. And I was like, oh, and that allowed me to know what was going on. And you're less tone deaf. You kind of know what's happening. Does that resonate?
Totally. And I think self-awareness, curiosity, and listening, and to make it a little stronger, there's something about active listening. You can be listening and multitasking, but if you're actively listening, you are, to your point, cued into what that other person is saying. Quick story. I remember my first management role, and I was talking to someone on my team. I have this natural ability to interrupt, especially if there's silence. And she was giving her update, and I was just like, okay. I asked a question, and she went into thinking. I was judging her, literally judging her, like, what's wrong with her? Why is she not talking? And I remember talking to my manager, and the first thing she said is, you're not actively listening. And I thought, I am listening. She said, no, you're not actively listening. And I said, I am listening. She said, Allison, you're not even repeating back what I'm saying to you. And I thought, I'm not actively listening. So she's like, so you're taking a manager class and you're getting your Myers-Briggs. But anyway, long story is that active listening and sort of a complement to curiosity and self-awareness is amazing when you think about those three things together. What does a culture of wow look like? You've mentioned it, right? You're writing a book. I know you're probably not wanting to give away all of the intel of that, but what does it look like, and how do high-performing teams work to sustain it? Is that something you can answer without sharing too much?
I want to share. The reason I'm writing a book is to share it all for free. My answer might be limited by how much I know about the topic. I'm really just in listening mode right now. One that we don't talk about a lot, but this is like a litmus test. I've thought a lot about litmus tests. How do you know? Because of the lack of self-awareness for a lot of people, what's a tool I can give leaders to know how the culture is doing? I think one is fun. I always ask people, what was your wow culture? What's your best job you've ever had? Even if it was the hardest job, we're going to turn around this 30-year-old culture, cultural transformations. They have fun doing it. And that is something universal. Look around. Are people having fun? If not, that tells you something. It doesn't mean a ping pong tournament, you have to root cause analysis, but the wow teams have fun doing it. Right now, I'm helping people build AI products. And I tell them, you can tell when you're using a product that people had fun building. You can tell. If I'm using an app or a new streaming service, I can tell if someone had fun building it versus if they were just cogging it away. And so I think fun is one that's been really powerful to me. I think authenticity is another one. Saying what you mean, and specifically not saying things that you don't mean. Like the core values is a great example. Don't say we have core values to do the right thing if no one's watching, if you're up to sleazy stuff. Say our core value is making money at all costs. It sounds funny, but be authentic. People, especially the younger generation, they smell that a mile away. And the amazing cultures, they're always authentic. And I'll say, like, that bullshit does not fly. If you get a bunch of top performers operating and having fun, and someone comes in here and it's fake, no, you can smell it a mile away.
Yeah.
You know, and I think those two things are on the list for sure. The others are up to debate, but I think authenticity is hard because everyone thinks they keep it real, you know, but just about what you say, you know, like buzzwords, world-class, DEI, all the other stuff. DEI was my favorite because everyone loved to use the acronym. But if you actually have to say what it stands for, then it's a different conversation. You know, so DEI, cool. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Use your words and break it down and challenge yourself to not use these buzzwords. Don't use the word world-class unless you mean among the best in the world. So use those words in that matter. Authenticity is hard because people don't know that they're inauthentic. And even if they do deep down, they don't want to admit it. Imagine an executive all of a sudden realizing they're full of shit. That can kind of throw you. And so that's the kind of thing that you push down typically when you're getting into real talk. Like if we're talking about a real human executive one-on-one, those are the conversations that you have.
One of your most recent posts hit hard. What if failure wasn't an option? I don't know if you remember that. This was not just about mindset. It was in some respects framed as a dare in my mind. Can you unpack what you meant with that and just give us a little color?
Yeah. So part of my management technique is really from the psychology days, finding tricks to trick people past their habits or quirks to get to results. And these are just little techniques. I've got a million of them. Some of them suck. Some of them work. This is a really good one because, you know, I used to say there are two kinds of people, and I stole this. I didn't make it up. Some people with a problem for every solution and people with a solution for every problem. And we've all been there where you're in there like, we've got something, we've got to make the decision. This needs to work. And you've got people that are just, someone comes with an idea and everyone's like negative, you know, here's why it can't work. I think one of the things that made me successful is my early psychology days. I was doing these psych consults. Someone had a suicide attempt or an OD or in an ER, maybe chained to the bed. And I have to assess them and make a decision. Do I take away their human civil rights and lock them up for 72 hours? Or do I let them go, trusting that they're not going to harm themselves or others? And so for me, failure was not an option. And I got to the point where I got really good at making those decisions. And then I get to where I'm in now, where there's a lot of really smart people that are okay with failing. I think a lot of times the specific thing that inspired that post was familiar in my area of influence. There was someone who was just avoiding hard things because they were hard. And, there's a big problem with the product, but they couldn't they wouldn't address it. And they're like, no, it can't be done. Can't be done. Can't be done. I'm like, okay, what if failure wasn't an option? What would you do? And he had an answer right away. This was a 6-month problem. I was like, okay, let's do that. But we had been talking about it forever. It's just one of these little things to trick the human in you to get there. Turns out there's usually a solution. I'm not saying it should be life or death or hustle culture, but please use that in your teams. If you hit that situation, ask yourselves, are you having trouble with something like, okay, I guess we're not going to hit that sales goal. What if failure wasn't an option? There's usually a way, like when something for my son, if something has to do with him and his safety, I'm going to find a way to do it. Done.
100%.
It's channeling that in the workplace. That was something that I think, I don't know if it'll make the culture of WOW book, but that's a technique that I really like.
I think what's really interesting about that question needing to be posed at all, a lot of CEOs and executives would be saying failure is not an option. Like, why is this even something we need to ask? So why aren't leaders just automatically thinking in the way that doesn't require that question?
Yeah, it shouldn't be. But I mean, how many teams do you know that get % of their OKRs?
No, you're right.
We say that failure is not an option, but people fail all the time. I knew one leader who every time a big project started, one of the first things that they did was talk about how to move back the goalposts and how to talk about what to do, how to delay this. And so their first goal was how do we make this a Q4 instead of a Q2 thing? The top performers, the WOW teams, are like, give us a goal, give us a challenge. For us, it sounds normal, but for some folks, it's okay to fail. It's okay to be mediocre. I think it's an accountability issue.
What's so interesting is that a lot of leaders don't see how the almost unattainable stretch goal would motivate a group of people. It's almost like make it hard.
Yeah.
Make it clear. What are we trying to accomplish? How are we going to win? How will we be measured? What's that thing we're trying to do that nobody else is doing? How do you make sure everybody on the team is clear about what their role is and doing it and then go? It's really something that leaders can do within their own control and give people some motivation. You've coached and advised countless leaders. What's the one shift, especially today, that you wish that leaders could just commit to?
I think committing to work on yourself. Make some personal goals, get a personal coach, work on yourself. Because you bring that stuff to work. Even if you work remotely, they can smell it through the Zoom. Like that to me, more than anything, if I had to choose one, would be that. I have been a leader who has worked on myself and gone through a divorce and other things. And when I started working on myself very hard, I became a much better leader, as evidenced by me asking people that I used to work with. And they're like, yeah, not good then. Yes, very good afterwards. And it goes hand in hand. That would be my advice. Let's work on ourselves. I think something that I just wanted to mention too, just in service of the audience that we're talking to.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed about these WOW cultures, especially leaders, they really care. Mm-hmm. But they really care. So work on yourself and learn to really care, or go do something you care about.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. And in the spirit of sort of that working on yourself, so we know that there are some leaders who are doing that constantly. They wake up, they go for a run, they sit down and read books, they study, then they go do their job. They have a coach. For that leader that doesn't even know how to start, how do they start?
Yep. I actually have a nice, simple answer. And this is the most straightforward thing I'll say all day. Sleep, exercise, and diet. That opens you up to be able to work on stuff. I'm talking about spiritual growth and working at, childhood issues, whatever, like growing as a person. But how you start is easy. Sleep, nutrition, exercise. And when you do those things, then you start going. And it sounds too simple, but I promise it's true.
So we talked about culture being a leadership responsibility and accountability, and you could leverage HR as a facilitator. We talked about the need for more self-awareness, curiosity, and active listening. I honestly love the close here, which is focus on yourself. Focusing on those three things, having nothing to do with getting leadership coaching or a leadership class, just focusing on yourself, which I think is so human. What is the thing we didn't talk about that you thought would be really important for us to get out there to folks today?
I think we hit all the points. I'll just bringing it home with the care thing. And I think a challenge, if I can do, I tend to hold leaders to a higher standard because as a leader, you affect so many people's livelihoods and mental health. Yeah. Listen this week and ask people how you're doing. Assume that you're one of those people that maybe is not so self-aware and find out, become self-aware. Find someone that will tell you the truth and ask them. You can use my thing of like, what do I do that's annoying that I don't know about? Find some way where people are not afraid to tell you the truth and find out how you're doing, listen actively.
I think the one thing I would sort of share there, and I have to, give credit to a colleague, but I think sometimes also explaining to people why you're asking. Look, I'm trying to work on something. I'm trying to do better at this. I'm trying to develop the skill. Sometimes that clarity makes people more comfortable to actually ask, because the question in and of itself could feel like something that's come out of the blue and what is this going to lead to? So if you give that little bit of color, like, look, I'm really trying to work on X, Y, Z and get better at A, B, C. What do you think about this or that? Or how could I be better at this or that? Or what does it feel like when I do this or that? Could be really super helpful. 100%. Ben, how do people find you, get in touch with you, buy your book? What are the ways in which people can reach out?
If you are interested in any kind of employee experience or customer experience, go to Amazon and Google badass IT support. I think it's the only one for Ben Brennan, or just go to my LinkedIn/IN/Ben Brennan. That's the easiest way.
So we talked about a lot on this podcast. We will have Ben back because we already came up with 3 additional topics that we need to talk about. I really appreciate your time and listening. DM myself or Ben if you have specific questions about this podcast. All the links that you need to get in touch with Ben are actually in the show notes. As always, lead with clarity and courage. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Leadership Rewired with Allison Allen. If today's episode hit home, share it with a leader who needs it. And if you want more truth talk leadership insights, subscribe wherever you listen, follow me on LinkedIn, and keep leading with clarity even when it's hard. See you next time.